Welcome to this explainer. Today, we are cracking open the medical case files to decode the fascinating and honestly pretty terrifying biological mechanisms behind the hantavirus. We're going to dig right into the primary source materials to figure out exactly what makes this deadly pathogen tick.
Right, so here is our roadmap for today's briefing. We'll start with meeting the hantavirus, then look at its vectors, specifically rats and water. After that, we'll dive into the cytokine storm, the two deadly syndromes it causes, and wrap up with treatment and prevention. Let's get right into it.
Section 1. Meet the hantavirus, the biological suspect profile.
Okay, right off the bat, the notes make one thing absolutely crystal clear. This is not your average seasonal bug. Hantavirus is classified as a biosafety level 4 pathogen. So what does that mean? It means it requires the absolute highest level of biocontainment. We're talking full positive pressure suits, dedicated air supplies, the whole shebang. It belongs to the Bunyiviiridae family, and it's billed as a spherical, single-stranded RNA virus. Now, what makes this virus such a formidable threat is actually how it packs its genetic cargo. It has a viral envelope, and inside, it's got 3 distinct single-stranded RNA segments. Think of them as small, medium, and long. The small segment, that encodes the nucleocapsid, basically its protective armor. The medium segment codes for glycoproteins, which are essentially the keys it uses to pick the locks and board our cells. And the long segment gives it the polymerase, its replication machinery. But here is the massive takeaway. Because its genome is broken into these separate segments, if 2 different strains infect the same host, they can actually swap segments. This genetic reassortment means it could, in theory, mutate into a brand new, highly lethal pandemic strain. Moving on to Section 2. Vectors, rats, and water, the modus operandi.
I want you to picture that classic historical image. A rat sneaking aboard a ship as a stowaway, silently carrying danger across the water to completely new shores. Well, in our modern context, that exact same stealthy threat is how hantavirus operates. The source notes really emphasize that the rodent host remains completely asymptomatic. They're the perfect silent vessels. They shed the virus through their urine, feces, or saliva, and when that waste dries up, it aerosolizes. It becomes airborne. We humans then get infected either by literally inhaling these microscopic particles or through direct inoculation, like drinking contaminated water or eating tainted food.
Now, for most types of orthohantaviruses, when the virus jumps from a rodent into a human, it basically hits a brick wall. We become what's called a dead-end host. We can't pass it on to anyone else. However, the notes flag one truly terrifying exception, and that's the Andes hantavirus. This specific strain has evolved a really dangerous trick. It can transmit from human to human. If you have close contact with an infected person, the Andes strain can spread, which obviously escalates the outbreak threat level dramatically.
Section 3. The cytokine storm, the inside job.
So what actually happens inside the body? This pathogenesis cascade is where things go seriously wrong. The virus enters and uses those glycoprotein keys we talked about to bind to B3 integrins, boarding our endothelial cells. Those are the cells lining our blood vessels. It sets up shop and replicates in the cytoplasm. But here's the crazy part. It's non-cytopathic. It doesn't actually destroy the cells it infects. Instead, its mere presence trips these massive immune alarm bells. Our own body completely overreacts. It triggers this catastrophic cytokine storm, flooding the system with inflammatory markers like IL-6. It's actually this overwhelming friendly fire that ends up damaging our vascular endothelium. Our immune system essentially shoots holes in the hull of our own blood vessels, causing blood plasma to leak out.
Which brings us to Section 4. 2 deadly syndromes, the aftermath of infection. The medical notes lay out a very stark geographical divide in how this leakage affects us. In the old world, meaning places across Asia and Europe, patients usually develop HFRS, or hemorrhagic fever with renal syndrome. Basically, the vascular leakage targets the kidneys. It's bad, but the mortality rate is generally less than 15%. But over in the New World, the US and the Americas, the virus causes HPS, or hantavirus pulmonary syndrome. Here, the plasma aggressively leaks into the lungs instead. And the mortality rate? It skyrockets to over 50%. It's incredibly severe.
There's this really striking hand-drawn graph in the source notes that just brilliantly and terrifyingly illustrates the reality of this pulmonary syndrome. It charts the patient's overall health, and you see this brief period of general illness, followed by an incredibly sudden, sheer cliff drop. Once that plasma fluid starts leaking into the lungs, it causes severe pulmonary edema and shock. The patient's health declines so rapidly that it can literally lead to death in just 24 to 48 hours. As the notes put it so bluntly, there is no time to spread. Now, bringing it back to our earlier theme of bodily fluids and water balance, the Old World Syndrome, HFRS, is a grueling physiological roller coaster that hits in 5 very distinct phases. It kicks off with the febrile phase, marked by huge fever spikes. Then, as blood plasma starts leaking, the patient drops into the hypotensive phase, where blood pressure plummets dangerously. Next up is the oliguric phase, where the struggling kidneys shut down and retain fluid. If the patient survives that, the body severely overcorrects in the polyuric phase, leading to massive rapid water loss, before finally slowly entering the convalescent recovery phase. To really understand the scale of this threat, the notes include a synthesis matrix, a scatter plot, comparing how deadly a virus is against how easily it spreads. If you look down in the high transmission but relatively lower virulence quadrant, you've got COVID-19. But hantaviruses, especially that Andes strain, are sitting way up high on the virulence axis. They are exceptionally deadly, but thankfully, right now, they have low transmission. The absolute nightmare scenario for global health is what happens if the Andes strain figures out how to inch further to the right on that graph. Let's look at Section 5, Treatment and Prevention, the Defense Strategy. Because these two syndromes attack completely different bodily systems, the treatments have to be highly specialized. To save a sinking ship in an HFRS case, doctors heavily rely on dialysis to bail out those failing kidneys and stabilize the patient's blood pressure. But for HPS, where the lungs are literally drowning in leaked plasma, the primary focus is oxygen. Mechanical ventilation is the standard go-to, but the notes highlight an absolutely crucial lifeline, ECMO. This is a machine that pumps and oxygenates a patient's blood completely outside of their body. And if it's deployed early enough, ECMO actually yields an 80% survival rate. It's a total game changer. So what about vaccines? Well, it's still very much a work in progress. There are some inactivated whole virus vaccines used regionally in places like South Korea and China. But, and this is a big but, the notes explicitly confirm that there is currently 0 vaccine available for that highly dangerous human-to-human transmissible Andes strain. The good news, though, is that science is moving fast. There are phase 1 human trials happening right now in the UK, and cutting-edge mRNA vaccine research is actively underway to help close this gaping hole in our medical defenses. Until those vaccines are globally accessible, physical prevention is literally our best and only shield. Remember how we said the virus sheds in rodent excreta and spreads through the air? Because of that, you must never, ever dry sweep or dry mop an area where rodents have been. If you do, you're just aerosolizing those deadly particles straight into your lungs. Instead, you've got to use water. The notes mandate wet cleaning methods, specifically using a 10% bleach solution and ensuring excellent ventilation. Also, fun fact, the virus is highly sensitive to UV light, which means natural sunlight actually helps destroy it. And of course, in a clinical setting, strict PPE and isolation are completely non-negotiable. So we've decoded how this virus operates, from its stealthy origins as an environmental stowaway, right down to the devastating stormy impact it has on our vascular system. Given its incredibly high mortality rate and that looming threat of genetic mutation thanks to its segmented RNA, we really have to ask ourselves, are our global health systems truly prepared to navigate the storm if a strain of hantavirus suddenly acquires the transmissibility of the common cold? It's definitely a sobering thought, and it's exactly why breaking down the science from these case files is so crucial. Keep learning, stay curious, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.